Hello everyone, my name's Judy McGuire and I'm happy to welcome you to the next of our winter's tales. This tale is a longer tale which we are going to divide into 4 episodes, so make sure you don't miss one. The story is called The Hunter's Wife and it's by Anthony Doerr. It was the hunter's first time outside Montana. He woke stricken still with the hours-old vision of ascending through rose-lit cumulus, of houses and barns like specks deep in the snowed-in valleys, all the scrolling country below looking December brown, and black hills streaked with snow, flashes of iced-over lakes, the long braids of a river gleaming at the bottom of a canyon. Above the wing, the sky had deepened to a blue so pure he knew it would bring tears to his eyes if he looked long enough. Now it was dark. The airplane descended over Chicago, its galaxy of electric lights, the vast neighbourhoods coming clearer as the plane glided toward the airport. Streetlights, headlights, stacks of buildings, ice rinks, a truck turning at a stoplight, scraps of snow atop a warehouse, and winking antennae on faraway hills. Finally, the long, converging parallels of blue runway lights, and they were down. He walked into the airport, past the banks of monitors. Already he felt as if he'd lost something, some beautiful perspective, some lovely dream fallen away. He'd come to Chicago to see his wife, whom he had not seen in 20 years. She was there to perform her magic for a higher up at the state university. Even universities apparently were interested in what she could do. Outside the terminal, the sky was thick and grey and hurried by wind. Snow was coming. A woman from the university met him and escorted him to her jeep. He kept his gaze out the window. They were in the car for 45 minutes, passing first the tall, lighted architecture of downtown, then naked suburban oaks, heaps of ploughed snow, gas stations, power towers, and telephone wires. The woman said, "So you regularly attend your wife's performances?" "No," he said, "never before." She parked in the driveway of an elaborate modern mansion with square balconies suspended over 2 garages, huge triangular windows in the facade, sleek columns, domed lights, a steep shale roof. Inside the door, about 30 name tags were laid out on a table. His wife was not there yet. No one apparently was there yet. He found his tag and pinned it to his sweater. A silent girl in a tuxedo appeared and disappeared with his coat. The granite foyer was backed with a grand staircase, which spread wide at the bottom and tapered at the top. A woman came down. She stopped 4 or 5 steps from the bottom and said, "Hello, Anne," to the woman who'd driven him there, and "You must be Mr. Dumas," to him. He took her hand, a pale, bony thing, weightless like a featherless bird. Her husband, the university's chancellor, was just knotting his bow tie, she said, and she laughed sadly to herself, as if bow ties were something she disapproved of. The hunter moved to a window, shifted aside the curtain and peered out. In the poor light he could see a wooden deck the length of the house, angled and stepped, its width ever changing with a low rail. Beyond it, in the blue shadows, a small pond lay encircled by hedges, with a marble bird bath at its centre. Behind the pond stood leafless trees, oaks, maples, a sycamore, as white as bone. A helicopter shuttled past, its green light winking. "It's snowing," he said. "Is it?" the hostess asked with an air of concern, perhaps false. It was impossible to tell what was sincere and what was not. The woman who had driven him there had moved to the bar, where she cradled a drink and stared into the carpet. He let the curtain fall back. The Chancellor came down the staircase. Other guests fluttered in. A man in grey corduroy with Bruce Maples on his name tag approached him. "Mr. Dumas," he said, "your wife isn't here yet?" "You know her?" the hunter asked. "Oh, no," Maples said and shook his head. "No, I don't." He spread his legs and swivelled his hips as if stretching before a foot race. "But I've read about her." The hunter watched as a tall, remarkably thin man stepped through the front door. Hollows behind his jaw and beneath his eyes made him appear ancient and skeletal, as if he were visiting from some other, leaner world. The Chancellor approached the thin man, embraced him and held him for a moment. "That's President O'Brien," Maples said. "A famous man, actually, to people who follow those sorts of things. So terrible what happened to his family." Maples stabbed the ice in his drink with his straw. For the first time, the hunter began to think he should not have come. "Have you read your wife's books?" Maples asked. The hunter nodded. "In her poems, her husband is a hunter." "I guide hunters." He was looking out the window to where snow was settling on the hedges. "Does that ever bother you?" "What?" "Killing animals for a living, I mean." The hunter watched snowflakes disappear as they touched the window. Was that what hunting meant to people? Killing animals? He put his fingers to the glass. "No," he said, "it doesn't bother me." The hunter met his wife in Great Falls, Montana, in the winter of 1972. That winter arrived all at once. You could watch it come. Twin curtains of white appeared in the north, white all the way to the sky, driving south like the end of all things. Cattle galloped the fence lines, bawling. Trees toppled. A barn roof tumbled over the highway. The river changed directions. The wind flung thrushes screaming into the gorse and impaled them on the thorns in grotesque attitudes. She was a magician's assistant. Beautiful, 15 years old, an orphan. It was not a new story, a glittery red dress, long legs, a travelling magic show performing in the meeting hall at the Central Christian Church. The hunter had been walking past with an armful of groceries when the wind stopped him in his tracks and drove him into the alley behind the church. He'd never felt such wind. It had him pinned. His face was pressed against a low window, and through it he could see the show. The magician was a small man in a dirty blue cape. Above him, a sagging banner read, "The Great Vespucci." But the hunter watched only the girl. She was graceful, young, smiling. Like a wrestler, the wind held him against the window. The magician was buckling the girl into a plywood coffin, which was painted garishly with red and blue bolts of lightning. Her neck and head stuck out at one end, her ankles and feet at the other. She beamed. No one had ever smiled so broadly at being locked into a coffin. The magician started up an electric saw and brought it noisily down through the centre of the box, sawing her in half. Then he wheeled her apart, her legs going one way, her torso another. Her neck fell back, her smile faded, her eyes showed only white. The lights dimmed. A child screamed. "Wiggle your toes," the magician ordered, flourishing his magic wand. And she did. Her disembodied toes wiggled in glittery high-heeled pumps. The audience squealed with delight. The hunter watched her pink, fine-boned face, her hanging hair, her outstretched throat. Her eyes caught the spotlight. Was she looking at him? Did she see his face pressed against the window? The wind slashing at his neck? The groceries, onions, a sack of flour tumbled to the ground around his feet. She was beautiful to him in a way that nothing else had ever been beautiful. Snow blew down his collar and drifted around his boots. After some time, the magician rejoined the severed box halves, unfastened the buckles, and fluttered his wand, and she was whole again. She climbed out of the box and curtsied in her glittering dress. She smiled as if it were the resurrection itself. Then the storm brought down a pine tree in front of the courthouse, and the power winked out, street light by street light. Before she could move, before the ushers could begin escorting the crowd out with flashlights, the hunter was slinking into the hall, making for the stage, calling for her.